Kayvon Asemani is a hip-hop artist and young entrepreneur from Baltimore. He began making music as early as elementary school and continued to develop his craft throughout his high school career. Presently, as a junior at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business, Kayvon continues to develop his brand after having performed for the United Nations, by furthering his clothing brand, and releasing his music video for his latest track, Raise, which garnered over 100,000 views on YouTube. Kayvon is talking with us today to share this journey into music and entrepreneurship and what it has meant for him. Hi, Kayvon.
How you doing, Anthony?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm honored.
No, of course.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. What you got for me?
Having started your music career so early on in life, how did you know you wanted to pursue music, and what was the process like at such a young age?
Right. That's a good question. I think about it a lot, believe it or not. When I was in elementary school, the first rap song I ever heard was Hot in Here by Nelly. It was on the Music Choice channel. I was like outside on the playground. My brother told me to come inside. I was 5, he was 8. And he was like, listen to this. And I loved it, like for the same reasons he loved it. All the energy, the music, the lyrics, just like I didn't really know anything about the message. I was 5 years old, but I was just like, I loved the way it sounded. So I went to my room and I just tried to pen some things. And you got to remember, this is elementary. This is like when you get the paper in school and it's got like the big lines on it and you're trying to learn how to write your letters. So like, you know, when everybody else, over time, like when everybody else is like reading Dr. Seuss and like starting to read bigger books, I'm listening to 50 Cent and like G Unit is big at the time.
The other rhymes.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm writing rhymes instead of reading. So that was like the way I kind of just like developed as a person, not only as like a poet or an artist or things like that. I was just thinking of it as, learning something as you would learn, science in school or math in school, things like that. So it wasn't necessarily a conscious decision like, oh, I want to be a rapper, I want to be an artist. But then over time, like, I was writing it down and I was getting a lot better. And then eventually, like, I was putting it on beats in middle school. And then when I got to high school, I was putting it out on the internet. And then by the time college hit, turning it into a business. And so that's basically, like, in short, the story from, like, the way it started and kind of like where it is now.
Wow, it's actually interesting that you would leave it there, because now my next question is going to be, how would you say that your sound, image, or brand has really evolved from that time to now at Penn?
Absolutely. That's important. I think, like, as an elementary school student, as like a 5, 6, 7-year-old, I was just basically writing about what I knew from my experience, like what I saw and what I lived on a day-to-day. And I was raised by a single mother, 2 siblings, and it was, like, again, not a conscious decision of, like, why I'm writing about the things I'm writing about. It's just what I saw every day. So, like, my message was informed, my image, so to say. I didn't really have an image. I was in elementary. But, like, what I was writing about was around that. But then when I was 9, I lost my mom to a domestic violence issue. My dad was in and out. And one of the times he came, he basically took my mom with him. And so me and my siblings were left orphaned. And that really just basically threw a wrench in the whole thing. I mean, life was hard before, but it was like my mom was taking care of us the best she could, so we were fine. But when that happened, it was like we were done for. Like, we were on our own until my uncle and cousin, like, they really, like, stepped in and helped when they didn't really have to, and they looked out for us. And then we eventually got enrolled into a private boarding school for kids in need. I was in 5th grade, my older brother was in 8th grade, and my sister was in the 3rd grade. And then eventually, like, went there and, like, grew up with a lot more resources, but around other kids who went through, like, tough circumstances growing up. So basically, like, as I grew, through middle school, through high school, that's what I talked about. I talked about, like, not only what I had experienced before I turned 9, but then, like, when I turned 9, like, everything after that and what I was experiencing now as a result of it. And then when I got to high school, like, as you get older, you start, like, looking around at the world around you a lot more. You start becoming a lot more aware of what's going on, right? Like, what's the greater landscape, right, that you're just a little piece of. And that's what I started to see, and I was like, wow, inequality is pervasive, right? And I experienced it early, right? But there was a lot of people who experienced a similar thing that I did, but they didn't get to go to a private boarding school like I did, right? Like they were still in underfunded school systems and wherever else in the country or the inner city or even rural areas, wherever they might have been, like they weren't getting the privilege that I was getting from my private boarding school, right? So while I got to get ahead through this environment and really like be in control of my own destiny with my own ambitions because of the resources I had behind me, I saw that there was a lot of untapped potential in other places, and and it's outside of these kids' control. So that's what I wanted to bring awareness to. That's what I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to talk about how my story, kind of like my narrative, right, can speak to a lot of those issues and hopefully relate to somebody, hopefully inspire somebody to try to make it out of their situation, but also motivate somebody who is well off and more well endowed to help these kids who have so much high potential, because look what it did for me. So that's really like my whole image of anything that I might have been doing, whether it's music or something else. And so with my music, I've really tried to hit that mark. And Penn and Wharton in specific was like my dream since the 8th grade. And nobody from a background like mine, like where I grew up, in Baltimore, like if you had my situation, right, or just the situations of the kids around me, like nobody there was going to Wharton, nobody there was going to Penn, period. College at best, right? Like people aren't doing that. And it was like a dream I had. And then once I got to this boarding school, obviously college became a lot more real, like the idea that I could get to college. But at my school, like nobody had been to Wharton from my school since 1977. So it's not like people are going to, they're not, and a lot of people didn't. I was the guy who was like, I was the top of my class, I was the star academically, but people even thought that I wasn't going to get to a place like, Penn that I was shooting for. So it was like really unlikely. And the fact that it happened was huge for my community, not only the school, but also like where I grew up originally. But then when I got to college, it's like, dude, Penn was a culture shock, right? Because you think about it, most of the kids who go to Penn, like this, I don't want to say it's like this for most people, but at least Wharton, like a lot of these kids, it was expected for them to come to a place like this one, right? But if it wasn't Penn or Wharton specifically, like it was a school that tried to be this caliber, right? Like that's everybody's reality. Whereas my reality is like, no, it's like I'm lucky to just even be here, right? So for me, it's like I wasn't taking this opportunity for granted. But at the same time, because I was able to kind of like see an opportunity even when there wasn't any in Baltimore, and like then when there was a little bit more at my boarding school, when I got to Penn, it was like this opportunity they just throwing it at you. You know what I mean? So it wasn't hard for somebody who came from where I came from to kind of like see that and try to take advantage of it. Certainly. And yeah, but just to like end on this, you talk about like how it's evolved since I got to Penn. Yeah. I think like when I got to Penn, before the people around me were going through what I was going through, right? So it was like we were in this together. At Penn, it's not necessarily the same situation, because there aren't as many people from a background like mine as there were, where I grew up at a place like Penn. Penn is a lot more privilege. There's a lot more money. There's a lot more, history of success in people's families, right? So it was more about like trying to find a way to bring awareness to these issues that I grew up with and that so many people are growing up with, without at the same time alienating the people who are here and come from a place of a little bit more privilege. Because that's a delicate balance. You can't be out here just pointing fingers, right? Because then people aren't going to listen to you. So I think the way that kind of evolved when I got here is like, how do I make a message, right, that addresses these things that I'm trying to talk about, but also like relates to these kids who are at Penn or at another college or wherever else they might be. How do I bring them all together? And I think like that's what I've made a conscious kind of like decision to incorporate in everything that I've done. And I think that's why when you go to my concerts, you'll see people from a bunch of different walks of life. You'll see kids at Penn. You'll see kids who don't go to Penn. You'll see people within the Penn community who are like in certain groups and kids who are in other groups. People who otherwise would not have come together, they're coming together at the Kayvon show. So that's the best way I could basically answer that question.